Okay, day 2, trying to work on this bike. Been reading all your comments about how quality merchandise this is here in front of us. So, some of the comments are funny, some are stupid, some are good. You have to read them to find out which ones are which. So, anyway, right now we're just going to do maintenance work on this thing, get it cleaned up, and get it safe to ride, and see if the girl wants this bike or not. If she doesn't want it, fine, then I'll probably do more work to it next year. Otherwise, for now, we're going to go ahead and modify it, clean it up a little bit, and fix things that are obviously been worked on and not put back together. So that means there's lots of unknowns to figure out. So right now I'm figuring out if this front tube is bad or not. I just put air in it a few minutes ago, and it already feels like it's getting softer, but we'll see if it goes down. Usually you can hear a leak. I haven't heard it yet. Okay, next problem is, a light work would be nice. Alright, I already fixed the front wheel. I wanted to tighten up the front end a little bit, because it's a little bit looser than I like. So to do that, we're going to have to take off some of the bungee cords so we can work on it. Not sure what those are all about, but I'm sure they're very important. Yeah. Can't live without them. Yeah. Takes 2 hands to get that one out. So basically what we're going to do is we're going to loosen up this top nut here. The jam nut's right under here. You tighten it up just barely a little bit, and you retorque this nut. Now, this one will put torque on the bearings, and then when you tighten this one up, it puts even more torque on it because there's clearance in the thread. So when you're tightening, you're against this thread. When you're pushing from the top, it goes down here. So that gap in there affects what your clearance is. So you have to go back and forth struggle to see who wins out. But when you're all done, you want to be, we have a little bit of a drag on your front fork, so it just doesn't just flop over. I like it where it goes about halfway over and then it flops. That's usually where I like putting it at. If you make it too tight, it just indents the rollers and gets a real notchy feeling. If it's too loose, it'll shake its head while you're riding. So when it's really bad, the whole front end goes clunk, clunk, clunk back and forth. So when you jack the bike up, you pull on your fork sliders here, and you jiggle it, and you can actually see the whole fork go clunk, 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 like that. That's when it's really bad. Now we have a hoist here, so we can just go up in here. That's what they make that for. And now the front end's in the air, so we can work on it. So there you go. Problem is the whole bike pivots on you, so not so easy. Now if I put a lift underneath the bike in the center, the bike would be more stable and wouldn't wobble around. But then I'd have to go out in the SUV and get the lift, and that's a lot of work. So we're gonna pass on that one for now. We'll see how this works. So here's our front fork clearance. Let's get the oil out of the way. Put it up here so it'll fall down and break. So you just take it and go back and forth over here. You see how there's no noise in there? So that means it's good. Let's see, it wants to flop, see? So I don't want to do that. I want to stay put, and then about here, flop over. So that's why I want to change that. I already checked the wheel bearings. They're nice and smooth. Wheels turning nice and freely. No problem. This is a Timken bearing wheel. Then you take the front fork and you go back and forth up in here. You go side to side with the wheel. Hear that clearance in there? That's what you want to see. But you don't want to see a lot of wheel movement here. You don't see a lot of side to side in the wheel, but you hear the clearance. That means you got the right amount of clearance in it. If the whole wheel goes side to side a bunch, it's too much clearance. And then you look at the tire. This tire is pretty bad, but you can see how the wheel is straight and true. It's not wobbling. It's not going up and down right in that view. This view here, you can see the wobble. Pretty true. So your wheel's good. You can run your fingers over the spokes, or something makes noise like a screwdriver. If you have a ting 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 noise, you're good. If it goes bump bump dud dud dud, it's loose spoke. That's bad. Then you have to tighten your spokes up, so you can hear how they make noise. That means they're tight. Got a musical instrument going on there. So quick check, that's all you do. Alright, so this tire, it's really hard to see, but it's all dimpled. Go doop, 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 high, 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 all the way around. And that's because it was either out of balance or the dampening in the fork tube is not doing its job. So that means the oil is way too thin, non-existent, too low, whatever, lots of reasons. So if the tire is underinflated, it wears out here. If it's overinflated, it wears in the middle. Ideally, you want to run your hand across the surface like this, and it's nice and round, curved, smooth feeling all the way across. That's what you want. When it's not that way, you modify things. Put more in, take air out. Put thicker oil in here. Instead of running 10 weight, run 15 or 20 weight. Thickens it up, makes it damper better. Or put oil in it if it ain't none in there. All these things are things you do. So that's how you fix all that junk. So this one needs a new tire, but other than that, it seems to be alright. It needs to have some oil put in it, probably 2 down the road, but I'm not doing that. I told them that's what needs to be done. They can do it themselves. Alright, let's get this bungee cord out of the way. It's already got a leak on my table, so I know it's leaking. That means it must be a Harley. See, there's the oil leaks. So where are they coming from? Under here somewhere. Back in here, no oil leaks, so we know it's good. So when I put the bike back down, I'll have to look. Actually, I'll probably jack it up and look better so I can see up under there where the oil's dripping from. So we can see it's got 2 different locations it's dripping oil on the table. So something to look into. Not overly concerned about that amount of leaks though. It's an oil. It's a Harley. They leak. No biggie. Okay, so we did our front end check, did the bearing check. Now we go back on the ground. Okay, now we can loosen up the top end here. So you need a crescent wrench or a big wrench. This wrench has been modified so it goes a bit further. So it should fit. There you go, look at it, it fits. Okay, that one's loose. Now you got to find something to get in there to turn the nut with. A lot of people use screwdrivers to jam in there. I prefer not doing it that way. I usually like using little punches. Find one that fits in there. This one appears to fit. Now if you don't know where the nut is, put a little mark with a felt tip. Okay, I went about 1 notch. There's little titties all the way around the whole nut. There's probably, I don't know, 8 or 10 of them, so I went 1. And then tighten it back down. As usual, the lock does nothing, it just rotates. Basically, the lock just does a wash, protects the chrome in the front end. Here's how to work the gas tank. It's always a good sign. About that much torque. Now if you turn the front end the other way and it goes against the fork stop, you can get a good pull on it without working so hard. I like working hard, so I do it this way. Okay, so now we can go ahead and jack it back up and see what we got. See, it's a little slower on the return now. It's a lot tighter. Okay, so it's got some drag on it now. Go a little bit tighter than that. It's not too bad though. Right, there's a lot of weight on the other side of the fork by the way the bike is kind of leaning like this a little bit, so you kind of a false number. See, this side over here is a lot tighter. Also, you got this cable up here fighting it a little bit. Electrical wire over there also. Okay, so I can go, it's pretty good where it is right now. I'm gonna go just about half a notch tighter. Do it again. Show you the little notches we got talking about here. So if you look up in there, you can see the little notches in there. So I went like one full one. So that's like about 1/8 of a turn. Or 1/10 of a turn, depending on how many notches are in there. Do a little bit more. About half a notch, maybe 1/3 of a notch. Tight. Okay, now if you're doing massive adjustments, you need to loosen up these pinch bolts and let the trees kind of center. I'm gonna go ahead and let them center anyway. Usually it's a 5/8 inch on these. Oh, that might not be quite the right torque on this. When your bolt is only this tight, it's not a good sign. That's why it doesn't hurt to check things on bikes you don't know anything about. Now the reason you want to loosen that up when you're doing your adjustment here is because the trees are going to have to spread out like this. Because when you're closing this up, they're going to pinch together like that a little bit. So when you loosen this up, they should center up. If they're really tight, you can hit them with a hammer lightly, and they'll move on you just a little bit. You'll actually see a mark up here where they'll move about 30 or 50 thou when they want to. This one being loose doesn't matter. Now being loose means the bike could want to wobble a little bit. Now is this loose because it's stripped, or is it because somebody was working on it and didn't bother to tighten it? It looks like they just kind of didn't feel like they needed to torque it any. So there's a 7/16 bolt you can pull on it. Now this one was loose too. So that's not a good sign when you're finding loose parts on your bike. Not good at all. They're not just a little loose either, they're way loose. Okay, so see now that was loose, let's check the top. Yeah, not exactly tight either. They're semi-tight. Alright. You have to check a lot of things on this bike. When you start finding loose stuff, that means you go over everything. The axle was tight, so that's a good point, I guess. Alright, let's see what we got this time. Okay, airborne. See that a little tighter now? Official torque sensing tool there, see? Got just the right, it's nice slow as it goes back, it just go flop, it goes slow. That means you got drag on there. Okay, so I'm good with that. So being a loose fork and loose bearing slightly loose, the bike would definitely have a tendency to wobble. This will make it handle a lot better, so you're in the corner, the bike won't be hunting around, it'll go where you want it to go. All that's good stuff. Alright, So let's go on the back of the bike. See, now the front of the bike was such a good thing to play with. Let's go back here and see what we find back here. When you find loose stuff like in front, you need to check more stuff. So right now, we're going to grab a couple wrenches over here out of the bucket. So we're going to get ourselves a 1/2 inch, a 9/16. There's a bigger one. I don't know about you. Double box wrench is a good one always. There's a 5/8, 9/16. Okay, we got a bunch of stuff. We need a 1/2 inch though. 1/2 inch. Okay. There's your normal selection of tools you need for a Harley. Oh yeah, and the important one. Hammer. You know this. And a hammer comes in handy for beating on stuff too and hitting on parts, and if they move, they're loose. See, that's nice and tight. Hit on the oil tank. Oil tank was moving a little bit. So if that's solid mounted, it's loose. So I don't know if you can see it moving, but it's moving. Hit the starter motor, nice and tight. Transmission's good and solid, but I'll check the bolts underneath just to make sure. Check the brake caliper. Seems to be tight. Rotor has a weird sound to it, like it's loose. We'll have to check those. Got Torx bolts on it. My favorite. That works. Alright, Torx bolts. See if that's the one we need. Yeah. Wrong side of the bike. Can't really get to anything. Wheels in the way. They don't seem to be loose, so I can't get them with this. It's too tight. No room. So I used to have some Torx L wrenches. I have no idea where that stuff's at right now, so I can't check it. Missing tools, don't know where they're at right now. Oh well. They seem like they're tight. These are just Allens here, so I'll use an Allen. If this is tight, I'm going to be good with a brake. If it's not tight, I'll put some wheels coming out if I have to. They're tight. Yep, they're not moving. Okay, brakes are tight. It's probably the brake pads I'm feeling. Yeah, they're loose in there. Hear the metallic noise? That's where that noise was coming from. Right there, hear that? It's the pads. Okay. The disadvantage, you can't really see in there to see the condition of the pads. We'll look up in here and see if you can see. It looks like there's material in there, so it looks like they're pretty new. I can even see material on this side, even though it's hidden. So the spring is not really doing a lot. Just kind of on there for the ride, it ain't doing anything. They do have the cotter key in there holding it together, so that's good. Alright, so I'm going to say that's probably good. Sissy bar is good and tight. Good with that. Check the axle now, make sure it's tight. Tight enough. Okay. It's already good. Okay, I'm going to go underneath the bike a little bit and check under here. So you can see underneath the bike here. When they're up in here, it makes it easy to look at stuff under here. So you can see there's oil residue up under here, everywhere. My guess is coming out of that breather hose right there. When you're going down the road, this is just a big chamber that blows all around under here. You see how there's oil up under here. It's all wet right here, but it's dry over here where the chain is. So we know it's not leaking out of the primary. So my guess is coming out of that hose and just blowing all under here. The hardware looks tight, but we're going to check it. We have to have a socket to get up under there. 16. I'll use this one. Can't see my short one anywhere. There it is. Short one. Alright, so I'm just going to put the socket up on all these 5 bolts. You got 4 here and 1 over here on the side. I'll make sure those are tight. Yep, there it is. That's good. 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 Yep, they're all tight. Okay, that's a good sign. So I don't know why the fork was loose. They must have been working on it or something. Okay. So let's see if we can see what there's oil leakage issues besides under here. We got oil coming out of this bolt right here because it's loose, so this bolt must go into the oil gallery inside the cam cover. They have this out because that's where the ignition wire comes through here. So that's probably that leak there, because you can see where it comes out of the cover right there. It comes around the motor and just drips right off the motor. Now the motor is wet all under it too, so there might be other issues. Looks like it ran that way too. So the whole bottom of the motor is wet. So oil pump appears to be dry. If the oil pump's dry, that means all the lifter block up here is dry. And it all looks like it's got dirt everywhere, so that's a good sign. If any of this stuff up here would be leaking, you'd have a trail going down it, and the oil pump's usually wet. Over here, pretty much bone dry. You gotta check your alternator stator, make sure that's not leaking. Looks pretty good. Oil filter looks dry. You go like that and see there's nothing under there, it's dry. That's all dry. Okay, now under here, this is the main seal inside the crank, and you can see there's oil residue right here. That's been blowing backwards. And it's wet all under the motor here and up from here on back. So either this case house is leaking right through here, which is always possible, or more than likely this seal up here is leaking, would be my guess. So you'd have to pull this whole motor, its primary off to get to that point. But my guess is it's probably a main bearing seal needs to be swapped out. So I'll tell the new owner. And there's a pull leak there, might be coming from that. Or it's underneath the motor. I don't know which one it is until you clean everything all up and see where it comes from. Right now we know it's wet underneath the whole motor, but not on top of the motor. The point seal is nice and dry. Usually they got a trail coming on going out through down this hole, and right down here, and it goes on down. So that all looks good. Transmission looks pretty good. The residue around the areas, but that's normal. It's fine. Okay, so the oil tank looks like there's a bolt up underneath through there, which is probably loose because it's a solid mounted tank. That means there must be 2 bolts up high here somewhere holding the top of the tank. They go right here. They actually have a rubber mount on them. So that's a 7/16. 7/16. Okay, that's got a 1/2-inch nut on it, so that means it threads into that. That all looks tight. So there's 2 bolts that hold the whole bracket on the frame, which are from the top. There's your 1/2 inch. Okay, I can go ahead and let this down now. Pretty satisfied with everything else I see looks tight. And this over here. Boom. Okay. I do miss my hoist. Nice having my hoist back. I like that. Okay, so we're going to look at the oil tank here, see if we can figure out how to tighten it down a little bit. Okay, seat is here. 2 bolts in here. Let's see if they're tight. Yep, appear to be tight. Those are tight. That's these 2 bolts right here where they go into the frame. That's where the bracket that holds the 2 rubber mounts is located. Okay, so we're going to check this one here. So that feels like a piece of rubber there. So I think this is their attempt to do a rubber mounted oil tank, and it's not really rubber mounted, it's just loose. A lot of people don't seem to understand that's how things work around here. That's good. I'm not even sure if that's even connected, but it might be. And it doesn't appear to be moving. Alright. Looking to make sure it's not rubbing down here, so I guess it's rubber mounted oil tank, that's why it moves. Alright. All this stuff here. All that stuff looks tight. Let's check our motor. It's tight. A lot of your vibrations on bikes comes to being loose motors, like this one's loose. Very hard to get to under there when the bike's together. Like almost impossible to get to. That one's tight. And that one's moving too. This one you get to with a box wrench right up under here like this. Get that one in there. And tighten that one up a little bit. The other side, it's like I said, it's hard to get up in there with anything. Very hard. Okay, so come in here for this one down here. This one from the top. Tatro torque. Do you want to know how tight that is? It's stinking tight. That's how tight it is. About that much. Phew, that rag is full of rotten gas. Yeah, now my hands smell like that too. Good. Okay. So to get to the other one, it takes a special tool, which I don't have right now, so I can't really get to it to tighten it. Takes an offset torque wrench I don't have. That'd be in my missing tool selection. Oh well, 3 out of 4 is tight. Okay, big one is a top motor mount. Check that. Tight. Not really. It's moving. This is your top motor mount bolt right here. We're going to tighten that up. There's a hex bolt on the other side. Should be a 5/8. It is. So now we got to tighten it up a little. About a quarter of a turn. It's tight. High pressure zip gun. These Ignis and Rad zip guns like this put out 200 foot-pounds of torque. The next brand down puts out about 70. Pay the money, get a good one. Harbor Freight ones put out about 35. There you go. Pick the one you like. Okay, so now we got bolts on top of the motor. Let's see here. Let's see what I need over there. Should be 9/16, but we'll see. Go ahead and check the motor mount bolt over here. Down a little bit there, easier. Hopefully it's done dripping all night. It's definitely not. That's pretty tight. Yep. Those are tight. Alright, so that all seems to be good. Once I get the coil out of the way, I can check the nut for here where these two pieces go together. See, two motor mount bolts. Make sure it's good and snug. Make sure your motor's in there good and tight. Alright. Well, the bungee cord in the way. Alright, that's it for now. Let me get cleaned up. I'll be back.